In our last episode, England fought the Dutch over shipping routes and trade laws. Victory meant more than bragging rights, it meant access. Access to riches from across the seas. And the sweetest prize of all, sugar, white gold, the addictive little crystals that could make or break fortunes, dynasties, even empires. But sugar's sweetness had a bitter cost. Behind every spoonful was the sweat of enslaved labor, the lash of the overseer, and the despair of entire peoples uprooted from Africa. Welcome to the Caribbean sugar colonies, where paradise became a plantation and profit was written in human misery. Picture it, the mid-1600s. England, fresh from battling the Dutch, seizes Jamaica from Spain in 1655. Not to be left out, Barbados, already a thriving colony, explodes with sugar profits. In London, sugar is everywhere. In coffee houses, tea houses, kitchens of the wealthy. Samuel Pepys, that compulsive diarist, noted in 1664, "We had sugar and wine and were merry." Sugar wasn't just a treat. It was currency, status, and obsession. But behind the dainty teaspoons of the elite lay brutal plantations where enslaved Africans toiled under the Caribbean sun. This is not just the story of crops. It's the story of how England's empire was built on sweetness and suffering. Barbados was the crown jewel of sugar. In the 1640s, planters shifted from tobacco to sugarcane. The profits were staggering. 1 acre of cane was worth 10 of tobacco. Within decades, Barbados was the most densely populated colony in the English world, not with free settlers, but with enslaved Africans brought in chains. By 1680, more than 60% of the island's population was enslaved. Jamaica, captured from Spain, quickly followed suit. English planters, investors, and merchants piled in. London bankers financed plantations. Royal charters guaranteed monopolies. The result? A tidal wave of sugar pouring into England. An English observer marveled. The wealth of our empire is no longer in mines of silver, but in these fields of cane. Sweet profits, bitter reality. Plantations were brutal machines. Enslaved men, women, and children worked from dawn until nightfall, cutting cane with blades sharper than any sword. The work was relentless. The cane had to be harvested and processed quickly, or it spoiled. Enslaved workers labored in crushing mills, boiling houses where heat reached unbearable levels, and fields where the sun showed no mercy. Mortality rates were horrific. Many enslaved Africans lived only 7 years after arrival. A planter in Barbados wrote coldly, "It is cheaper to buy new slaves than to breed them." For the enslaved, resistance was constant, from work slowdowns to open revolts. One enslaved Jamaican was recorded whispering, "We have nothing to lose but our chains." But the lash was always waiting. Overseers, often brutal and drunk with power, enforced discipline with whips, irons, and execution. This was paradise inverted: green fields, blue seas, and human suffering woven into every breeze. While enslaved Africans died in the Caribbean, English merchants grew fat in London, Bristol, and Liverpool. Sugar, molasses, and rum flowed in. Manufactured goods flowed out. Coffee houses in London buzzed with investors gambling on plantations like today's stock traders. Some of England's grandest fortunes and buildings still standing today were built on sugar money. Barbados alone, by the 1670s, generated more wealth for England than Ireland, Scotland, and New England combined. It's little wonder the navigation acts tightened around the Caribbean like a fist. Colonies could only trade sugar with England. No Dutch, no French middlemen, just English ships, English merchants, English profits. The empire was becoming addicted, not just to sugar, but to the wealth it brought. The sugar economy was inseparable from slavery. Plantations needed labor, endless, cheap, expendable labor. Indentured English servants, once common, couldn't endure the heat or brutality. They also demanded land once their contracts ended, so planters turned more and more to Africa. By the late 1600s, the Royal African Company was shipping tens of thousands of enslaved Africans across the Atlantic, packed into ships like cargo, chained in holds, treated worse than animals. Survival rates were grim. Those who lived reached colonies where life expectancy was often shorter than a decade. And yet English society normalized it. The profits were too sweet. The political class was complicit. Even the church owned plantations and invested in sugar. As one clergyman admitted uneasily, "We preach salvation while profiting from damnation." The empire's moral debt was building. But the enslaved were never passive. Across Barbados, Jamaica, and other colonies, revolts simmered. Some escaped into the hills, forming maroon communities, free, self-sufficient, and defiant. In Jamaica, the Maroons became a constant thorn in the side of English authority, wagging guerrilla warfare in the mountains. Others resisted quietly, through sabotage, songs, secret networks of solidarity. Their stories rarely appear in planter records, but their spirit shaped the Caribbean. These were acts of survival, resistance, and humanity in a system built to erase both. Sugar was not just a crop, it was empire fuel. It paid for wars, palaces, and fleets. It transformed English tastes and diets. It tied the empire to global systems of trade and slavery that would endure for centuries. The Caribbean sugar colonies were the beating and bleeding heart of the 17th century empire. And yet the story does not stop here, for sugar was only one side of the triangle. Ships carried sugar one way, guns and goods another, and enslaved Africans across the Atlantic in the infamous Middle Passage. In our next episode, The Slave Trade Triangle, Profit, Pain, and the Making of Britain's Wealth, we follow that triangle. From Africa to the Americas to Britain, the slave trade wasn't just a chapter of empire, it was the engine. If you've learned something today, or if you'll never look at sugar the same way again, subscribe and join us for the next chapter. History isn't just sweet or bitter, it's both. See you in the next episode.